Why don't we go ahead and begin? For those filing in, you may have seen that scan. There's a link in the chat to do a brief survey. Um, as many of you know, I'm Arne Kumigai, Vice Chair of Education for the Department of Medicine. I have the pleasure of moderating the citywide medical grand rounds. This month is a special one that is actually devoted to the use of generative AI in health professions education. And for that, we have three different speakers. But what I would like to do to start is to uh, do the land acknowledgement for the department. So we recognize that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships on the land in which the University of Toronto and Department of Medicine conducts its business. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Today, this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work and gather on these territories. Land acknowledgements are only the starting point for larger conversations. More concrete acts of restitution and transformation are needed to address underlying inequities and blatant discriminations in the distribution of resources between Canada's First People and settlers. And I'd just like to take a moment that we oftentimes read these, but to spend a few moments sometime during your day to day to really reflect on what it means in terms of the tremendous debt that we owe Indigenous nations on whose land we are working, and to correct the tremendous injustices against them over the years of Canada's and North America's history. Thank you. I would like to. I have the pleasure of introducing three speakers for today to launch a conversation about the use of generative AI in medical education. Ken Masters is an associate professor of medical informatics in the Department of Medical Education and Informatics at the College of Medicine and Health Sciences, Sultan Qaboos University in Oman. He has been widely involved in informatics and education for more than 20 years and has published widely in those areas. His publications include Artificial Intelligence in Medical Education, Ethical Use of AI in Health Professions Education, which is an AMI guide, a checklist for reporting, reading, and evaluating AI technology enhanced learning, research, and medical education, among many others. The next speaker is Sofia Valanci. Sofia is originally from Mexico, where she did her general surgery training at the American British Cowdery Medical Center in Mexico City. She began a surgical practice there and started teaching there. She is a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. Her passion for medical education in particular, and in continuing professional development and culture in medicine, led her to McGill University, where she completed both a master's and PhD in surgical education. And her dissertation focused on peer coaching for practicing surgeons. She currently works as the program advisor for Learning and Connecting Department, the Learning and Connecting Department at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada in Ottawa, where she leads quality improvement on learning frameworks and guides the implementation of learning needs for fellows, including AI. And lastly, a member of our own department, Heather MacNeill, is an associate professor of medicine in our department, faculty lead of educational technology and continuing professional development at Temerity, and co-instructs a master course in educational technology at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health. Heather is also serving as interim dean for faculty development at the new Toronto Metropolitan University here in Toronto. And she is a practicing physiatrist. She is a proud member of the Division of Physical Medicine Rehabilitation, and she is medical director of stroke rehabilitation at Sinai Health. Heather has been teaching about creating and doing research on issues of educational technology and healthcare for over a decade and has been a vibrant and innovative leader in our department. I will now turn it over to you. I believe, Ken, you start. Thank you. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Arno. And I just want to correct, maybe I sent an old bio. I'm not the faculty lead for educational technologies and CPD currently, but was before. So sorry, just to correct that. And Sophia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Arno, for that introduction. My name is Sofia Valanci, and I have to tell you, we have nothing to disclose. You know where we work from our bios, and the views that we share here today are our own personal views, and they're not our institutions. That's very important. And we do have to tell you, we are biased to educational technology, and we normally walk the talk. So after you complete this webinar, we think you will be able to describe the potential applications of Gen AI in health professionals' education using a pedagogically informed framework, recognize the ethical issues related to the use of Gen AI in education, and generate ideas for applying Gen AI in your own HPE practices. But first things first, we have to set the stage for a few things. The model of generative AI that you use today will be the worst you will ever use. It gets updated constantly, daily. Best practices this week will not be best practices next week because of that. It is a rapidly changing field with different Gen AIs and updates coming up. Anybody can sign up and use Gen AI, but if you learn how to use it correctly, you will be ahead of the game. This next part is really important. Ken doesn't agree with this. We have our own thoughts on this. Gen AI will not replace you, but someone who knows how to use it will. So it is a tool that you need to learn how to use. And finally, you need to trust what comes out of it, but you need to verify. Gen AI will take you from 0 to 50. You have to do the 50 to 100. It will not replace human intelligence. So having said all that, AI is a science of prediction. Just like physics is a science, AI is a science. And it's a big umbrella that encompasses subcategories like machine learning, which is just a statistical process to learn from data and improve from experience, and deep learning, which is a network made to mimic the human brain connections, literally neurons, to solve more complex processes. And while AI is a big subject that has come up recently, it's not new. It's been around since the Dartmouth Conference in 1950. And however, do you remember that we used to need 12 floppy disks to do an update on Windows? We had very limited power and computers. We had probably no funding. We basically had no updates. So we had what are called the AI winters. And it's very important that even if it's a big subject, we get it straight. It's a tool. It's just a tool like the abacus, like the calculator, the laptop, even the stethoscope that you use every day. It is a very powerful tool, but it's still a tool. So let's take the mystique out of it. So I told you it started in the 50s, a few winters, and then magically in 2022, particularly November of 2022, ChatGPT came out showcasing an impressive natural language capability. And the computational power was now good. We do have the power to support it. And we're so excited to use this that OpenAI goes to 100 million users in just 2 months. It's the one that has done it the most quickly. So what does this mean? The new wave of artificial intelligence doesn't really bring us intelligence as such. It brings us prediction. For example, deep genomics, which is artificial intelligence, improves the practice of medicine by predicting what will happen in a cell when the DNA is altered. ADA improves customer service by predicting customer intent in online interactions. Amazon predicts based on what you have bought, what else they will be able to sell you. So it's basically prediction. And prediction is the process of filing in missing information from what you already have. So it takes you the information you have and it uses it to generate new information you don't have. The more the AI observes the human, the better it becomes at predicting the specific action it will take. And what do we mean by prediction? Isn't prediction like this omni thing that happens in the future? Well, we all know Harry Potter, Snow White, Macbeth. They were all motivated by prophecy, which is a prediction. But, for example, King Croesus of Lydia didn't believe in these prophecies. So what he did was he sent an oracle, a messenger to each oracle, and on a particular day, asked them what he was doing on that day. So prediction can also be things that happen in the present, and that is how Gen AI works. So if I tell you the cat in the, you are all probably thinking on how to answer this or how to fill in this sentence, right? You would fill it in with hat, probably. So that's what Gen AI does. It takes the sentence I give it and it tokenizes it. We don't really know how it tokenizes it, but for means of explanation, we're going to say it tokenizes it by using each word is a token. Then it puts the words into that neural network I told you about, that deep learning, the one that looks like the brain. And it has inside there, it has like a puzzle, a lot of words, hat, mat, bed, sun. And depending on what it's predicting, on what you want to say, is what it's going to tell you. So, for example, for a temperature of 0, which is the most validated response, it will tell you the cat in the hat. For a temperature of 1, which is the most creative response, and this depends on ChatGPT or Gemini, it depends temperature of 1 or temperature of 2, it will tell you the cat in the sun. So it also depends on what you want it to do, but basically this is how it works. It predicts what you want to say. And what do we have? We have tons of large language modules, which are text. You know, the most commonly used is ChatGPT, or it's the one that started it all. We have Copilot, which is what institutions use. Gemini, Meta now has it. You have it in your WhatsApp. It's not that good, but you have it there. Apple now said it's going to work with OpenAI, Claude, and Perplexity. But then you also have multimodal generative AI. So you can create images, you can create videos, you can create your slides from scratch. If you know how to prompt, you just put the prompt in and it creates slides. And you can even create, well, videos and stuff, because I'm not going to ruin Heather's surprise. So, for example, this is one video.
Bonjour et bienvenue à notre atelier sur l'exploitation de la puissance de l'IA générative dans l'accréditation des soins de santé. Perspectives éthiques, pratiques et futures. Bonjour et bienvenue à notre atelier sur...
Okay, just so you know, I speak 15% French. I do not talk French like that, not in my wildest dreams. I can probably read it, but I can never communicate in French. So that is all an avatar created with Gen AI. Heather.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna open our Socrative then. Everyone can see that okay? Okay, so how are we all using it? And I just really like to encourage everyone to populate in the chat the conversation. We are literally all learning about this on the fly as we go. Someone said to me, Sofia and Ken and I probably present on this probably about once a week right now because it's just such a hot topic. And someone said, oh, it must be nice to be like a surfer riding the wave in front of everyone. I'm like, oh, no, it's not like that. It's like 10 of us who are beginners crash on a surfboard, crashing all the time, looking back saying, did you see that wave? Why did it do that? What? Hey, have you had this experience? And so we're really all learning about these spaces together. So please populate the chat. What are you using? How are you using it? What's confusing you? We're going to learn from you just as much as you're learning from us. Okay, so thank you to those who filled out the Socrative, 59 of you, which is awesome. Yeah, and this is what you said. Most people actually aren't using it in healthcare education, but they want to know how others are. So that's what we're here to show. And some of you, 20%, are using it several times a week in multiple ways. And that's what we're seeing. There's a wide variety of people using it and how they're using it. So if you're one of those users who are using it a lot, let us know. Populate the chat. Okay. Um, yeah, so how are you using it? Well, we'll show these results and we'll see a smattering of a lot of different ways. Some are 11% are using it for creating images in your presentation. Um, and you all can see my screen, right? Yeah, okay, perfect. Um, and helping generate ideas, that's a big one. Um, for research purposes. Yeah. Okay. And if we go on to the next question, this one is, are you using it in any other ways? Some people are using it for reference letters to help tweak things. Yeah, that's a really common thing. And you'll hear Sophia often say, these generative AI tools, they can help get us from 0 to 50, right? Get us that head start, help creative ideas come along. But then we have to use our human brain to get us from 50 to 100 to really tweak it to how we want it to be and not just relying on generative AI. Yeah, literature reviews, paper assessments, to refine statements. Yeah, to help us with crafting how we want to write things. Um, Okay, PowerPoint presentations. Yeah, it can help you create your PowerPoint presentations efficiently. Um, Coding assistance. Yeah, okay. And then lastly, we're going to get into this a little bit more, particularly when Ken talks, but what concerns do we have? Because this is really important whenever we're learning things together on the fly. We always have to question things. So, accuracy, cross-checking facts, things like hallucinations, entrenched biases, right? So, and Ken is going to talk about bias, how to use it properly. And that's why we're all here learning together. Um, the art of medicine and not just focused on data-based teachings. Absolutely. Plagiarism, ethical concerns. Yeah, how our trainees are using it. If we're just learning and they're just learning and we're not talking about how to learn it, we're going to keep running into problems. Okay. Privacy and confidentiality, copyright. Yep. And then this dependency down here. Is it going to decrease our creativity and our clinical reasoning due to over-reliance? Okay, thank you so much. And we're going to go back to the slides here. Okay, great. And so you all can see the slides okay there? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So a lot of people ask us, okay, well, that's great, but where should I start? Um, and this is usually what we all talk about. So number one, no prompt engineering techniques. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Number two is understand the ethical considerations and things we need to be careful about. Ken's going to go into that. And establishing and negotiating those norms. So just like I said, we're all learning this together. We can't really just say, hey, this is how you use it and why you use it, because that's going to change next week. So we have to keep these conversations going. We have to model it in ethically and pedagogically informed ways. And then lastly, we need to start with educational theories or frameworks. So with any educational technology, we can't just be like, hey, that's a cool tool. I think I'm just going to use it. Or we're going to be missing the boat. We really need to start with our pedagogical principles first, using our theories and frameworks, and then think about these tools and how they can help give us more options in our teaching toolbox. Okay, so I'm going to start with Kerns, which, we all know and love Kerns for curriculum development. Who here is using Kerns already or knows about Kerns? And so you can just maybe put in the chat too if you're familiar with Kerns. And we're just going to go through Kerns as a framework and talk about, well, what AI tools could we use to help us in our pedagogical design? So maybe we start with problem identification, and we can use tools like Research Rabbit, Consensus, or Cite to help us really dive deep into the literature and also look at connections between authors and other papers to help us get a different view on the literature. Or maybe we move into specific needs assessment. So maybe we interview a few people and have generative AI help us summarize the key thoughts out of those interviews. We can also take data-driven insights. Again, just like somebody said, not in isolation. We need to put it together with everything else that we know, but to help summarize data and create visuals for us. Goals and objectives. I see a few of you are already using these, and we often do this a lot in our workshops, using it to create goals and objectives using Bloom's taxonomy and SMART goals. And you can also help it create a punchy description or marketing materials. And educational strategies. Well, there's a plethora of these, and I'm going to talk about them in just a minute, but you might want to use them to help create clinical skills scenarios like simulation cases or case-based learning or MCQs. And so Claude and Perplexity are options for this. Implementation. So we were just talking about translation, real-time translation, and we all know Zoom can give us closed captionings at the bottom, and that's come a long way. But things like Wordly can go a step above, where you can have learners choose from hundreds of languages, and it not only will give it closed captioning, but it will also translate real time, just like you saw Sofia's video where she doesn't speak French and it's moving her lips in a different language, looking like she's a proficient speaker. So this allows us now to reach all these learners all over the world. If we want to translate this, what we're talking about, into Spanish, we can automatically do that. We might also want to use Gen AI tools to flip what we're learning. So maybe we have a great discussion here, and then we put that discussion into a Gen AI tool and say, okay, what were we missing? What else, Gen AI, can you help us as a near peer learner? And it will give us some ideas. And then feedback and evaluation, not only plopping our learner feedback into there to give us feedback, but we can say things like, hey, can you take this talk and tell me what Arno Kumagai would tell me from an EDIA perspective? What am I missing? Which is pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to get a little meta here. I'm going to step back and say, who here notices something unusual in these photos? And you can put up your hand, you can answer in chat. Just going to open my chat here. Maybe, oh, right. Okay, great. Asma, I think you had your hand up first. Anything unusual you see in here?
I mean, you can see which one is not natural and which is natural. Like
Yeah,
the picture on the left, you
Yeah.
can see that it's not natural because the faces are different. They look, and the photo on the right looks like it's more natural photo, which I'm not even sure now when I
Okay.
look closely. Maybe it's not also. Maybe all of them are, not real.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. No, all of these images are AI generated. These are not real people. But having said that, within these AI generated images, do you see something that looks a little weird? Maybe yes, maybe no. Some people see it, some people don't. And as you're looking for that, I just want to talk a little bit about this idea of precision education. Okay, we all know about precision medicine, right? There's this idea that a lot of people were talking about around 2018, and then I think the conversation stopped because then the pandemic happened. But this idea of how can we tailor our learning for our learners specific to their needs? And now that we have these tools like generative AI, we're starting this conversation up again. So having said that, anyone see anything in these photos that look a little bit weird or different? You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. Can't get the hands right yet. Limbs and hands. One person missing their hands, arm. None of them look real. Yeah, so a lot of things that, they just look a little, AI generated, which is true. Okay. The answer I was looking for actually is if you look carefully here, you'll see some of them are kind of popping out of a computer or aren't naturally sitting at the desk. And the reason I asked Gen AI to do this, because I wanted to portray, well, what would it be like if we use Gen AI as a near peer learner? Remembering it's not the expert, we still have to go back and verify. But what if we could get these things? So in Medical Teacher earlier this year, someone published this idea of personalized digital learning companions. So what if we all started med school with our own Gen AI companion who started to know our strengths, our weaknesses, our context in which we were learning, our conceptual frameworks, and worked with us to really push us in areas that we needed to grow or give us kudos in the areas that we're really good at. And what if these PDLCs followed us right throughout our trajectory, starting in med school, moving to residency, and even into our CPD, and provided objective feedback? I think sometimes, we might get feedback and you know, there's the human to human feedback, which is super helpful and adds that human context. But what if there's an objective way to get feedback and move us forward too? And building on some of our needs too, like if we're ESL, helping us with those translation bits. And this might be as an individual or even as a team in our CPD learners. Okay, so now I'm going to take that concept of precision education and now I'm going to pretend like I'm teaching about it. So how can generative AI tools help me? So remember, you've just done your needs assessment. You looked at the literature with generative AI tools. You developed goals and objectives. And now you're going to say, okay, what about educational strategies? So I'm going to go to Notebook LM. Who here is using Notebook LM or has heard of it? No? Okay. And feel free to put anything in chat as well if you have been using it or hear about it. And I'm just going to play a little quick video here. Okay, so this is Notebook LM. I've created a few notebooks, but this one's on precision education here. And you'll see that I've uploaded a few core articles that I've asked Research Rabbit to help me search for. And then I've even gone into ChatGPT and said, hey, can you create me an essay on this concept of precision education? And I've actually uploaded that as a resource. So now we're getting a little meta. And you can see I can create all of these things in Notebook LM. So FAQs, study guides, table of contents, timelines, briefing documents, and I can use all of these things with my learners. So here's an example of an FAQ. So it has different questions that I might want to pose to my learners, as well as some sample answers that I could build on. But there's a lot of other options. There's glossaries that has short answer questions and answers, as well as some essay questions that you might want to use. And then there's other specific questions. It says, well, do you want me to answer it around this question or this angle to help you think about what you might want to post to your learners? So you can see there's a lot of different options, but I want to talk here about the audio overview. So here's an example of a podcast. Can you hear the audio?
No.
Sorry, hold on just 1 second. I think because I started sharing with the Socrative. Here's out. Here we go. See that okay? Am I sharing the right screen?
future of how doctors learn.
Absolutely. It's incredible how much medical education is changing.
We're talking precision education, tailoring everything to the individual. And we've had some really fascinating research to dig into.
We've got academic medicine, insights on AI, even how our Stone Age brains fit in. It's going to be a wild ride.
Let's jump right in. So traditionally, medical education's been kind of like
massive lecture hall. Everyone gets the same info at the same pace, whether it suits them or not.
Exactly. And our sources point out this one size fits all. It's got limitations.
Huge limitations. It's not just about being engaging. It's about making sure doctors are ready for the real world.
Okay. Sorry, looks like we're having some sharing options issues again. There we go. Okay, sorry about that, but I think the wrong screen was being shared, but what I did want to share is
we
fact
heard
that
the audio though, Heather, so it's okay.
Yeah, so this is what I want to show you. Those were not humans talking. This was generative AI. Who here was surprised by that? Who here thought that it was humans? Yeah. And a lot of people find that mind-blowing. So imagine you can throw in a whole bunch of papers for your learners and come up with podcasts that they now can listen to while they're taking the TTC or commuting or waiting in line to get their groceries. It may not be an expert level podcast, but you can generate a lot of information very quickly on your top papers, and you can create these multimedia. So having said that, why stop at podcasts? Why not create some videos? So here we go.
Hello everyone, I'm here to guide you through an exciting journey into the future of medical education. Today, we're exploring how artificial intelligence is transforming the way healthcare professionals learn and grow. Imagine a classroom where each learner's unique needs are met with precision-tailored content. No more one-size-fits-all education. Thanks to generative AI, this vision is becoming a reality. Hello everyone, I'm here to guide you through an exciting...
And so what I did there was I just took the essay that ChatGPT created for me, and then I threw that into InVideo to create for me a video. Now, if I got experts in the field, could I create an even richer and more thought-stimulating video? Yeah, but if I want to create something quick to grab my learners' attention and have multimedia learning, this is a great way for us to start creating multimedia to reach a variety of learners in different ways and engage them in ways that we know are really good for our learning when we're using multimodal ways of learning. Okay, so we're going to go back to the idea of prompt engineering. Who here has heard that term prompt engineering before? Yeah, okay, quite a few people. Okay, so there's a lot of different models that you can use. There's a Raptor model, the 5 Rs. We're just going to talk about the one that we often use here, which is act as a role, perform a certain task using in a certain format, using a certain tone, with describing the main objective, and don't use certain things. Now, this all makes sense, right? Like if you were to go to your educational assistant and say, hey, can you create me some objectives? They're going to look very puzzled and say, what do you mean? Who's the audience? What are you presenting on? How do you want me to word this? Do you want it to be like formal or inviting or etc.? And it's the same way when we're conversing with any LLM. We really want to guide it. And remember, the more you can be specific with it, the better answer it's going to give you. What we like to say is garbage in, garbage out, right? And remember that the first prompt you give it is always going to be the weakest. We should always refine everything. We should reprompt it, say, I like this, but I don't like that. Not only for us, but everyone else. Remember, we are training it all the time. So what we tell it we like and what we don't like is going to help the next person. And you should all remember, it only takes you from 0 to 50. You still have to finish it off from 50 to 100 with your own intelligence. Okay, so how does this look like in real life? Well, we just did a talk for KMH, and we just gave this example. So we used that prompt engineering technique please act as this is the role, psychiatry medical educator. 2, the task is create an outline for a 30-minute orientation session for medical students coming to KMH for a 1-month rotation using a formal but welcoming tone. There's the tone, with the main objective to provide an overview of what they will need to know while they work on the ward here. Okay, so that's the objective. Please include information from our KMH website. Don't use information on specific clinics. Okay, and you can see, remember we talked about how these things are changing on the daily. Here's ChatGPT is one of their newer features. It will now show you what resources it went from to build this outline for you, which is, I think, is really helpful when we're looking at things like bias, etc. Okay, speaking of bias, I'm now going to turn it over to Ken.
So thanks very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen? Just confirm.
Not yet.
No. There we go. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to be talking about ethical issues, and this is not meant to be a downer, but just to put things a little in perspective. So this is an AMI guide that I produced a while ago, and what is interesting is that it was published in March last year, and already it has 136 Google Scholar citations, and it has been viewed more than 23,000 times. Now, we might consider that, this is on ethics in artificial intelligence, in health professions education. My goodness me, that's a really, really narrow area. How can it have such interest, right? Why the massive interest? And there is the realization that if we get the ethics of AI wrong, we get everything of AI wrong. And that's something that has dawned on people in the last couple of years. It really is as straightforward as that. And if you paid attention to some of the issues raised, for instance, in the Hollywood writers' strike, in the New York Times suit, and arguments around ChatGPT 4.0's voice when it first came out, then you probably guessed that ethical issues are a problem. And I have already seen 1 or 2 issues or 1 or 2 questions along these lines raised in the chat, and I'll be able to deal with them in my presentation. So the thing to remember, though, that is, although it's a worldwide issue, each institution, and in fact even each individual, can begin by setting up appropriate structures to deal with these issues. And the starting point is we need to identify them. And that's what we are doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI's ethical models. I'm going to talk about your responsibility, and then what the areas of concern are. Now, these are the areas of concern that I'm going to be dealing with, but actually there are quite a few, and in fact the list is actually even longer than this. But I'm just going to be concentrating on these because of what we have available as time. All right, so what are AI's ethical models? Well, the thing to remember is that there's no such thing as ethically neutral technology, all right? And this has been evident since technology really entered into education, but it's really just coming to the fore in AI. And yet most AI, including ChatGPT, doesn't admit to be grounded in any ethical model. And as I say, the ethical issues in technology have actually been discussed for decades, and you can go back quite far in the literature to actually see this. But because of AI, it's now in our face, and we cannot ignore these. So when we talk about AI ethics, we talk about AI alignment. And that word really means aligning AI's ethics with our ethics, which is okay, but the problem is exactly
hear my voice.
Could everybody mute, please? Thank you.
Okay, so the problem is, who is this our that it's actually being aligned to? And the thing that you need to remember is that AI's ethical models generally reflect the designer's ethical models. And this is something that you have to bear in mind, because the example is that ChatGPT usually reflects United States left-leaning ethics. Now, That's quite great if that is the same as your ethics. But two warnings. Firstly, it's not so great if that's not your ethical model. But secondly, it should also give you a warning that any AI system that you use will be grounded in the ethical models of the designers. And if you happen to be using one that fits yours, that's great. But the next one that you come across, you need to know something about where it came from and what is going on, because you want to know what ethical model is sitting in the background. And that is something that you really have to bear in mind with any AI system. And we look into AI and we like to think that we look into a mirror, but actually we're not really seeing a complete accurate picture of ourselves. It's sort of a picture of ourselves, but it's somebody else. And the thing that you need to realize then is that you have responsibility. And why do you have responsibility? Because it's not all them. You know, we tend to say, oh, well, it's up to the designers and it's up to the people who are creating it. They need to take care of the ethics. No, you've actually got a responsibility. And the starting point is that your responsibility is to understand what these ethical issues are and to use ethically created issues and to use them ethically within your context. That's what you need to be able to do. And if we want to have ethical AI systems, then we ourselves must be ethical. All right, that's part of our starting point, because our ethics are also built into these AI algorithms. And I'm going to give you a very, very simple example. You know that if you wish to conduct research on anything, you're going to invite a research subject, and the research subject might accept or might decline. So if the research subject accepts, then that's great. You thank them, and you continue with the research with them. On the other hand, the research subject might say, for whatever reason, no, thank you. And you thank them, and that's it. Okay, that part of interaction with them stops. There's no like, oh, but why, or would you consider this, or whatever. No, you ask, and that's it. Now, that is a standard ethical model, right? There's nothing rocket science about this. This is how we conduct ourselves, or we know this, and we teach our students this. However, look at this example. Now, this is an example. This is an email that I received from someone. You don't have to look at the entire thing, but I'm just going to point to these underlying areas. All right, this is a person conducting research regarding the ethical implications of using AI in medical education. So this tells you that this person is actually working in this area. And this person would like to conduct an interview with me, and the interview is to be a 40-minute interview. Well, I didn't have the time, all right? And so I simply said, okay, thank you very much for your invitation. Unfortunately, I cannot make myself available. That's it. So we're at the stage where the research subject has been invited and has said no. That's it. Discussion over. You thank the person and you move on. But what actually happens is this person replies. And now we start the process of negotiation, all right? Firstly, emotional blackmail. It would be exceptionally kind of you. Well, everybody wants to think of themselves as kind, all right? So that's it. If I refuse now, I'm being an unkind person. And then they negotiate on the time, all right? And then thank you once again for your consideration. So really putting tremendous pressure on a research subject. And this is from someone who's working in the area of ethics. So if we look back at this model, what they've actually done is they've changed the model, all right? And they've decided, no, they're going to pester and bargain and hassle as much as possible until the person relents. And that's why I say be careful, because also, apart from looking in the mirror and seeing something else there, we are also seeing some form of reflection of ourselves, because when we build the AI ethics, we build our own ethics. So this is not something that is separate. This is not something that we look at the designers and say their ethical models are bad, right? Realize that we've got a connection with this as well. And certainly, if not in the design, then certainly in the use of it. Because this person who believes that they can behave like this, what is going to happen when they're using these AI systems? So the areas of concern, we start off with something called data and algorithm bias. And this is also something that you may have seen in all computer systems. In fact, if you're using something like a clinical decision support system, you'll know that you start off with a population of data. But if data, only a selection of the data is actually used, then that gets drawn into the AI system, and that becomes the basis for the algorithms. And so AI algorithms based on the biased data will result in biased AI. And as I say, this is something that you will have seen in any system. So imagine if you have a clinical decision support system and all the data comes from white males aged between 25 and 35. You can see that there is the bias. Of course, on the one hand, it's actually quite good. If your patient happens to fit into that area, then you know that you've got something good, all right? But of course, you've got a problem if your patient is outside that range. But you have to know that about the system to know that your patient is outside the range, which is what we get into now, right? And the now is it's your responsibility, therefore, to question vendors and the others who develop and sell these systems. So when the vendor comes along and says, we've got this AI system and it can do this and can do that, you say, tell me about your training data. And 9 times out of 10, the vendor will say, oh, I don't know anything about that. That's up to the technical stuff. You speak to our technical people about that. Your response should be, no, you go and you talk to your technical people about that. And when you've got the answer, you come back. Just as you would not use a drug if somebody vaguely said, oh, this drug is very, very successful, and then you say, well, show me the data, show me the randomized control trials. Oh, that's all just technical stuff, you know, like, don't really worry about that. You'd say, no, I want to see some of these results. Well, there's responsibility on you to see some of this information about the AI systems that you're using as well, because they can be heavily biased. Which then leads on to the issue of transparency and accountability, because bias is actually impossible to remove. Every system will be biased, all right? It always is biased. What you have to do is you have to find out, as I say, you have to press the representatives, you have to find out about the algorithms, you have to find out about the training data so that you can identify the bias. And so then you mitigate the bias by the transparency of the data sources. So same thing that you would do if you understand that your patient doesn't fit into this group. It doesn't mean that you can't use it, but it does mean that you have to use it with care, because the level of accuracy is not going to be the same as as it would be if your patient fell within that group. And a criticism of ChatGPT is that they don't actually talk much about their training data. And then aligned to this, the transparency is not only on the design, but on the use. Who is accountable for when things go wrong, when the stuff gets used and things go wrong? I'm sorry if on your screen you're getting a tail coming up. I have a cat on my desk joining in sometimes. Okay, so we then move into something like discussing intellectual property and plagiarism, and this was actually raised by someone in the chat. Something that you need to consider is that students use it, and we're concerned about this, but of course we also use it. We use these things, and we need to find out from where is the information sourced. And this is something that is an ongoing problem, and because we worried about using material from people without giving any form of compensation. Has it been used fairly? Has the information been drawn fairly? Have people been compensated? We don't know. The counter argument is that it's just the same as learning a language. I learn a language, all the words that I've used today are in the dictionary. So I don't give a dictionary credit for the words that I've learned. I've just learned all these words and I'm just putting them in a particular order. And with generative AI, surely that's all it's doing. Right? This is still a very unresolved area. The last issue I want to deal with then is equity in access, because it's all very well saying that everybody in the department must use it. You want to set assignments for your students. You want to make sure that they all actually use it, because you know that they are going to use it. So build it into your assignments. That's a very, very common way of working. All right. But in order to do that, there is an ethical imperative to ensure that everybody then has equal access. And this takes various forms. Firstly, there's the physical access. So the person must have a computer and they must have a network to be able to function. So does your institution provide these things so that people can actually use them? Then there must be financial access, all right? Because if you simply tell people, you tell your students, you tell whomever, oh yeah, you must use these things. Well, those who've got access to only to the free version are not getting the same results as those who have access to the subscription or paid version, all right? One way around this is for an institution to have an enterprise account for ChatGPT, and then it means that everybody gets access to the same high quality version. And then there must be awareness and training. Don't just throw the students in and say, okay, now you got to actually use it and you got to figure out how to use it yourself. They need to be trained how to use it. They need to be trained how to use it properly, all right? So that they then really do have proper access to these tools. And so with the learner or participant or even patient access, which is something that you might want to consider when you're dealing with your patients, there is some responsibility on you to try to guide and instruct these people in how to use the systems properly, not just throw them in at the deep end and say, use the stuff. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Sofia.
Thank you. Can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there are pitfalls when using AI, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through them all, but I want to make one point clear. It does have an impact on planetary health. ChatGPT consumes 2 liters of water per 10 to 50 questions. This is 4 times more than they thought it would be. And if you do that multiplication by 100 million users monthly, we are using 50 million liters of water that needs to be drinkable water. So that is something you just have to keep in mind because the conversations are coming up. And I'm just going to leave the conclusions here so we can open it up to questions so you can read our conclusions.